everyone. Welcome back to Bethany Urban Farm. This is Coral, and today I'm at my local garden center and I'm going to show you some bagged soil and what to look for when you are purchasing bagged soil. So this is the first type of soil they have at my garden center. Right away I noticed that this is local. It's from Nanaimo, which is about 2 hours away from where I live, and it's from a local farm in Nanaimo, which is great. So it has humus soil, which is minerals, probably with some organic matter mixed in if it's humus soil, peat moss, coconut husks, sand, and perlite. So this is going to be really well draining, but probably not enough organic matter for my tastes and probably not enough organic matter for a vegetable garden. I would recommend this for ornamentals that grow primarily in desert regions. This would be really good for them. You could also use this for houseplants because it's so well draining. Next we have this one. So it's again a potting mix. I do love that it really goes into detail about what's in it, and goes into detail about what the ingredients do. I really like that. I like that all these potting mixes have coco coir in. They also have peat moss, but you know, it's reducing the amount of peat that you have, which is always good. And there are positives and negatives to both peat and coir. I'm not familiar with zeolite. I'm going to have to do some research about what that does. Coral from the future here. Zeolite is a highly absorbent rock that when it's heated, it releases steam. And that's how it was discovered, because when the rock was heated, it released a lot of steam, so they discovered that this rock was capable of absorbing water. So it's added to soils and composts and potting mixes to retain moisture and then release that moisture when it's heated, which is super cool and perfect for dealing with drought in the summer. But they also talk about the difference between peat moss and peat. I'm gonna have to do some research about this. I'm learning something new because I didn't know there was a difference between peat and peat moss. So this is really cool, actually. The peat that they talk about the peat soil that they talk about is actually created at their farm. So at their farm, they have their own peat system where they grow their own peat soil, and that's combined with peat that is taken from naturally occurring peat bogs. And the naturally occurring peat bog stripping is what I personally have a problem with ethically. So any way that we can reduce the amount of peat that we're stripping from the natural resources and replacing that with farmed peat is great. So they're cutting down the amount of peat moss by combining with coco coir and then also by growing their own peat. So they have peat from the peat bogs and then peat soil that they farm at their farm. Nature's nutrients, though, that sounds like something synthetic or something, I guess it can't be synthetic because it's organic, but it looks like something that I would want to know exactly what's in the nature's nutrients. It's kind of like when you get frozen dessert and you're like, what is that? I would like to know more. So nature's nutrients is a type of organic compost-based fertilizer that is locally made in British Columbia, where I live, the province in Canada where I live. So that's great. It's organic, it's derived from compost, and it's local. So overall, these ingredients are awesome, and I'm just showing you how you really just want to look at the different ingredients. This is another one. It's very similar. The only difference is that this one has perlite, so that will make it a little bit lighter and a little bit better draining. Wish that it had percentages, so like how much perlite as opposed to compost, because sometimes you can get ones that have like 50% perlite, which is kind of a waste of money. But if it's serving a purpose to aerate the soil and it's not the majority of the mix, then that's great. I also love that this is in a 50-liter bag. That's a really, really big bag. These ones are 20 liters. This one's 28 liters. And by getting a bigger bag, you are just reducing the number of bags that you have to buy, so reducing the amount of plastic without having to get bulk soil. So this is the sea soil container mix that I was mentioning in my previous video. This is what I love. So it tells you exactly how much of each ingredient there is. So I love that it tells you there's 50% organic matter, and then this is the regular sea soil, which is, it tells you 50% fish byproduct and 50% bark and other organics from the forest. So this is pretty much this is entirely 100% organic matter, whereas the container mix is about 50% organic matter. So yeah, that's the overview of the soils at the garden center. These are probably more high-end or specialty soils than you would find at your local grocery store or hardware store, but I am going to take us to the hardware store as well, just to compare the differences. Most economical would be the 50-liter bag for $15. Although it's pretty neck and neck with the sea soil for the 32 liters for $10. And then 20 liters for $7. So I've just gotten home and opened the bags of soil that I picked up from the garden center, and I am super impressed with this kind of soil. I haven't tried it before, but the woman who works at the garden center was a big fan of it. She said that it's very popular, and yeah, it's different than the sea soil, so I just wanted to bring it home and have a look at it. So let's look at it together. Okay, so this is the soil. You can see it's really light and fluffy, and that's largely because of both the coco coir and the peat moss. There's not too much perlite at all. There's hardly any perlite, actually. It's just kind of there to help with some drainage, but it's not like majority perlite, which is what I sometimes worry about. So yeah, this is just one of the examples of amazing soil that you can get out of a bag. So I didn't end up going to the hardware store because I'm trying to cut down on unnecessary shopping trips because of COVID, and I thought it would be silly to go and put myself at risk and others at risk when I didn't even need to buy anything. So I didn't go to the hardware store, but I will just say that when you're at the hardware store, look for the exact same things that I mentioned when you're at the garden center. So look at the ingredients, look for organic ingredients if that's important to you. Make sure that there is a high ratio of organic matter to filler. Filler is things like peat, coco coir, perlite, although peat and coco coir are better than perlite because peat and coco coir are organic materials that have decomposed, whereas perlite is just rocks. So yeah, look for a high percentage of organic matter. Over 50% is what you want for vegetables. You can have a lower percentage if you're growing just ornamentals or houseplants. So look at the ingredients, look for a high ratio of organic matter to filler. Local ingredients, local companies, and local farms are awesome. So if you see on the bag, this is made at X farm, you can Google that farm and usually it'll come up and tell you where it is. And remember, you can always mix more expensive, great quality compost with lower quality topsoil if you need to work within a limited budget. So thanks for hanging out with me today and chatting about soil. Please leave me any comments or questions that you might have down below. I am happy to chat with you about this topic. I can get super nerdy about soil because it is fascinating. Another point that I did want to make is that something that came up for me that I wish I had talked about in my response to My Gardener's video is that you don't ever want to be planting into 100% compost. It's way too dense. It's just unnecessary. I think that probably 75% compost is the most you would want to go. So if you're mixing your own by adding compost to coco coir that you buy on your own or peat that you buy on your own, I think that 75% compost is the highest ratio of compost that I would want. It's just way too dense for planting directly into 100% compost, and that's pretty much like widely accepted in the gardening community. So I did want to make that point before I go.